just going to move this. I'm a little bit more vertically challenged than Nurse Heather. How's everyone doing today? Good? All right. You know, I first joined cannabis back in 2010 in the state of Nevada. I've been a registered nurse at UMC Children's Hospital back in the 90s and even at Sunrise Children's. During that time, I was even considering coming up and working at Reno. You guys have a wonderful children's hospital up here. But at that time, I became sick. So cannabis is my medicine. And a lot of people don't understand that, but it's done some amazing things in my life and through children. And one thing I didn't realize is when cannabis was first introduced to me and said, "Hey, Jules, did you know that cannabis can cure cancer?" I'm like, whoa, 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 that's like a very bold statement. But it did one thing for me. It got me to go home and start Googling, because it is an amazing plant, and we don't use it in the hospitals. I've worked with many, many children over the years. And one of the most important things that I've discovered is children, they're our future and actually deserve the same beneficial rights as any other human being on this planet. We know that cannabis aids in bringing balance within our bodies and is a key to our future in health and wellness. But did you know that today, now, is the time to learn why it's important to include your kids? I always say, kids are our future. We're not always going to be here, but the good news is they will, and we have to give them the best beneficial start that we can possibly can. Some of the things I want to go over with you today are children and medical cannabis. The controversy is it right for your child? How many people have a child, know people that have children? You might be a grandmother, a mother, a father, a grandfather. I know there should be more hands for people related to children in this room. There you go. All of us are somehow connected to our children, and we are responsible for teaching them the most things. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about the current laws for children here nationally and even here in Las Vegas, I'm from Las Vegas, but here in Nevada, and anecdotal case studies. And I also, we are part of Cannabis Nurses Magazine, where we have actually gone through in our July-August issue discussing some of the presidential cases that we've had. And also, I have a lot of patients and parents that come to me and say, well, what do we look for in pediatric care with your physician? So we'll be going over those important things. So Nurse Heather, you did a phenomenal job in showing us what the endocannabinoid system is. It's our connection system. We actually have a balancing system. And we now know, as we've gone through the previous lecture, that all mammals, humans, have an endocannabinoid system. I, you, and yes, your child. We also discussed in detail some of the items and conditions that cannabis can actually beneficially help us. So many of you in this room are probably already consuming cannabis or utilizing cannabis for one of the many ailments that you probably see up here. But did you ever consider the fact that your children also might have these same conditions? And since we all have an endocannabinoid system, why aren't we giving them the same beneficial value and a fresh start as we? So it is effective for our kids too. One of the interesting things is working in the ERs over my life with children is we have all these medications that we put in these tiny little bodies. And they're like, well, Nurse Juhlzie, we can't give this to the kids, it's just not safe. We don't have clinical trials on it. But then I also mentioned too, how many annual deaths do you have with cannabis compared to tobacco, poor diet, alcohol, aspirin? And I laugh because I even say that cannabis is safer than peanuts because you actually have higher incidence of children aspirating on different things, and cannabis yet is the safest, I believe. When parents come into the ER and their child has been seizing over 100 times a day, I get really emotional because these poor little kiddos have these toxic chemicals, opiates, benzos, you name it. And when they come into the ERs, they're helpless, they're relying us on medical providers. What do we do? Well, naturally, parents are challenged, they're saying, here, we have to give your child these benzodiazepines. This is the little black box warning. Some of our pediatric parents and mothers, I know Colton, I'll be talking about him a little bit later, his mother always said, oh my gosh, I had all of a sudden all these little black box warnings. I have to like sign my child away. You know, this is the only last resort. But these are methods of treatments that we use every day. And they naturally just sign their responsibilities away to be able to have these federal agencies with the highest warning. So a lot of people don't know this, but these actual drugs that we put into these little bodies, most drugs prescribed for children have not been tested in children. We have clinical trials for adults, but we do not have clinical trials for children. And why would we? We don't want to put kids through an unknown drug that could be possibly unbeneficial to them. However, because these are the only solutions that we have as a treatment options in the normal medical profession, there is no demonstration of safety and efficacy in adequately well-controlled clinical trials. However, we are still administering these drugs to our children. Why? When we have something so natural that doesn't cause any deaths. And people say, well, there's just not enough research on the children, Jules, so we can't give it to the children. Well, then why are we giving these black box warnings that actually, communicatively, if the use of opioids and benzodiazepines, your possible sedation, respiratory distress and depression on the child, coma, and death. Those are the things that these parents are dealing with on a daily basis, yet they're still administering them. And the sad news is, our children are part of this opioid epidemic. I have seen more kids coming in whacked out on benzos that they just don't work anymore. And then when you're trying to complicate it with all these other pharmaceuticals on top of it, and more pharmaceuticals and more, you run out of options. So if we run through the gamut of all the options, what are our other choices? When parents come to me and they say, well, I don't know if I should even try cannabis, this isn't even legal, they have all these concerns. And one of the things I love talking to parents about, did you know that children using cannabis, they're actually developing normally, they're improving their quality of life, they have less seizures instead of the 100 that might be coming down to 1 or 2 a day, which is significantly important to some of these kids. And their milestone markers, some of these kids are hitting them faster than ever. There was a picture that Heather had up here of the breastfeeding mother, and oh my gosh, we can't have mothers actually consuming cannabis while being pregnant, and let alone consuming cannabis and breastfeeding. Well, if we already know and have the science that the endocannabinoid system is a great beneficial value to immunities through breast milk, then why aren't we allowing our mothers to do that? Why are we having CPS or social workers in birth when they're tested sometimes in hospitals for THC, and it creates a whole gamut of problems? It helps with seizure control, neuroprotectant, no harmful side effects, and it's bringing balance to our body. And better yet, it's non-addictive. Heather talked briefly about how we have a deficiency in cannabis. I do not believe for a minute that any one of us are actually addictive to cannabis. What we are is dependent upon relieving the symptoms through the simple plant. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I was raised in Southern California with a right-wing family of Republicans, and I had Nancy Reagan in my household, who always told me, just say no. I was a huge advocate for my children being part of the DARE program, and I was raised believing that cannabis was harmful to our bodies. I never consumed it, I never used it, I followed the rules of the land, and I did everything by the book. But did you know, it's no longer the NO, but the KNO. And that's the new trend of today, is just saying no. I have one of the authors I always have loved and admired, which is Rabindranath Tagore. He was part of the 19th, 20th century, and he did a lot of literature. He actually won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1913, and he was known for his activism and stepping out of the box when things weren't really going well in society, he was that one person that would have poems or stories or songs, and he said it best by saying, "Don't limit a child to your own learning, for he was born in another time." I was born in another time. I had my children, my boys, go through the DARE program. And did you know that the DARE program quietly recently took marijuana, cannabis, off of their teaching as a serious drug? It was super quiet. They didn't even really talk about it, but we found out about it. And it's so important to know that this plant is not what we once known it. So have an open mind when you're talking about it and considering it for your kids. So we have a controversy also is whether or not it's right for your child. And there's some key points I always bring up to my parents also. One of them is, did you know that the government has 3 main studies? It's an anti-inflammatory, a neuroprotectant, and an antioxidant. Now these aren't studies that I came up with or anybody else. These are actually true live governmental studies that our government published. Now, if we know it's an anti-inflammatory, it's a neuroprotectant, then why aren't we allowing our children to utilize it as a preventative medicine? Another point I like to put out too is, did you know that the US government holds the patent 6630507? Now this is a patent that says, hey, our government owns this patent, but our federal society says, no, you can't use the plant, but we have one that's saying it's beneficial and one's saying it's dangerous and keeping it from the people. So I always ask the question, if it's not beneficial to the human life, then why do they own the patent and then add the synthetic form of cannabis if it's not beneficial to us? And that was, Heather had that wonderful slide of why? Why aren't we getting it out to the people? Especially since we have 0 deaths. 0 deaths for 5,000 years. Our humans and our mammals have been utilizing this plant. And it's just that we're in a very critical time in our political realm also, that why are we having this kept from us? So I always tell the parents when they come to me, this is a huge challenge and choice that you as a family need to make a decision on. It's not up to me. I can provide you the tools and the information and the education behind it, but you as a family need to come together and start building your medical team to find out if this is actually a medicine right for you and your family. Now, a lot of our states who don't have medical marijuana statutes in their state, if their parents are caught giving their child, they have risks of their CPS getting involved, and this can be extremely damaging to the family. And their kids can be taken away. We have parents that leave their families that they've been rooted in and going to Colorado and going to these other states and even to here into Nevada, and they're actually cannabis refugees. This is a serious problem, folks, that our kids can't even have the access and we still have these dangers. And I always tell my parents, you know, it's unfortunate, but the laws haven't actually yet caught up with the science behind the plant. And when they do, and they might even know that, but we know that some believe that because of the profit-driven and the greed, and it's not profitable to have certain product lines in the dispensaries, yet we know this plant works so well. So, what are our current laws for children? We have states with medical marijuana laws, just a few: Maine, New Jersey, Florida, Colorado, Nevada, and we have a lot of other states that are up on the ballot for having legislation passed too. Now, it's really interesting because everyone's like, oh my gosh, recreation.